Welcome to the STARS program, Seniors Taking Active Roles in Society, with your host, Anita Finley. Your comments and questions are welcome during today's broadcast. Call us toll-free at 888-721-0074. And now, here's your host, Anita Finley.
Well, this is a treat for us. So many of you who've been our listeners have been listening to Darwin Porter, who for many, many years, of course, he's been the author of so many celebrity books. But what you don't know, hidden behind him, and really out in front for me, is his partner, Danforth Prince. And Dan is the co-author now of some of the books that Darwin Porter has been producing. And the latest one, which this is kind of great because no one has really heard about this yet. So this is a real coup. Love Triangle. It's Love Triangle, Ronald Reagan, Jane Wyman, Nancy Davis, all the gossip that's unfit to print. How'd I do with that? Is that right?
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So talk about the book.
I'm given a credit as co-author of this book, but if anything, I'm merely the man who sort of traces up the loose ends, cleans up the grammar, and gets the thing out in book form. Darwin is really the author. I have on my hands with him in my capacity as publisher and him as our most prolific writer. I have a man who's been studying these undercover stories for 50 years. And this book that's coming out called Love Triangle is an exploration of Ronald Reagan's years in Hollywood. I'd like to say that it's raunchy, but it's not raunchy. It merely reflects the prevailing attitude going on at Warner Brothers when Ronald Reagan was a young contract player there.
So let me just ask you a question. In all the reading and all the research, was there ever even an inkling that he would be a world figure? That's interesting.
No one would ever dream that Ronald Reagan would ever not only be governor of California, but be president of the United States. Back when he was in some of the movies are okay, some of the movies are truly terrible, but no one would ever dream that it would have been possible at the time that he was an actor.
Okay, so I was just curious. I had not heard about that. Well, all right, let's go back to him as a young boy. When he was 8 years old or 10 years old, what kind of a family life did he have?
Well, it was very Midwest. It really was a wholesome dream version of an American childhood. It was in Dixon, Illinois, Chicago, really the grain belt, really agrarian, church-going, upright morals. It was also the deepest depths of the Depression, and I think that the values that Ronald Reagan brought out as a president were indeed formed by his childhood, getting extra jobs, being a lifeguard, making do with limited resources. I believe that certainly was a part of his background, but he certainly proclaimed that and made that part of his public identity throughout the rest of his life. So a wholesome childhood with an alcoholic father, certainly rather anything but grand. His father was a shoe salesman and his mother was a housewife with a strong religious bent. He got the acting bug based on some community theater early in his life and carried it forward to a radio announcer's job. He was a sports announcer for a while. But that wholesome American look coincided very well with what America was yearning for before the war, and he fit the bill. He was a character type who got a lot of roles, never really excelled at acting, but certainly was a very competent player who showed up on time and learned his lines.
When I think about Elizabeth Taylor and about Brando and all those, and Hepburn. Yeah, right, Hepburn. And the kinds of, the kinds of books that you put out. So people need to go under Darwin Porter, and you need to look at all the books. So you can go on Blood Moon, and you'll see the books. And I have friends I'm always passing those books to. They take them on their trips, and they're just gaga with everything. In fact, Lady Gaga's going to be...
Thank you for that. That's okay.
It's true. And he was good looking.
Oh, he was very good looking. He was very good looking with the kind of natural swimmer's body that by today's standards of steroids and frequent exercises and the gym clubs and blah, blah, is not exactly a buff body, but it was certainly lithe, and he acted for the University of Southern California. He was a model for some of their art classes.
So was he well endowed?
For their art classes, they wanted him to go nude, and no, he refused. He just wearing a loincloth or something. But the body was acceptable in Hollywood standards of the day, and how nice that he survived and bought his parents a house with the money he made at Warner Brothers. A very good and dutiful son throughout the whole thing, always showing a fine allegiance to his parents.
He had a great head of hair.
He had a great what? Head of hair. Oh, yes. Male pattern baldness was not his problem. Yes. The curse of late middle-aged men. No, he really did. He kept all of that throughout his presidency, and a certain folksiness which went over very well. This book is written not as an attempt to detract from Ronald Reagan in a scurrilous way. It's done almost with a sense of amazement about how the worlds of entertainment and the worlds of politics conjoined so gracefully in the person of this one man. It's astonishing how he played it. It's amazing how he pole vaulted his experience as an actor into leader of the free world. It's astonishing. The lessons from this book, way beyond the gossip associated with this affair with that movie star and that affair with that movie star, blah, blah, all of which have richly permeated the book. But it's just, I think, a role model for any future entertainer who wants to become active in politics. George Clooney comes to mind if he ever makes a bid for the presidency. I think
wow, I know it.
Look at this book. because nobody did it better than Ronald in terms of parlaying that. He also was hired during the war, World War II, as a I want to say a propaganda agent for the Army. Propaganda meaning industrial films, meaning educational films, meaning recruitment films. Propaganda might be too harsh a word, but that's the word I think that they gave the position at the time. But Ronald became very visibly photographed again and again and again in a U.S. military uniform, more than almost any other actor in Hollywood, except maybe Jimmy Stewart. And really was out there burnishing his reputation as a man of the armed services. I want to say almost a man of the cloth. That's not quite the right word, but a man associated with the greater good and the greater glory of the United States. When it came time to transfer all that to a political position, he really was tailor-made, image-wise, for running for political office. I don't think any circumstances like Ronald Reagan will ever come again in terms of that transition.
And so he was a good communicator, wasn't he? Because that's what we remember about him as a president. So he must have been a good communicator.
Well, I think he was a great communicator about issues that he felt passionately about. He really did get the political bug early. He was a born speechmaker. He once had to return to Dixon, Illinois, in the company of then the world's greatest gossip columnist, who was Luella Parsons, who was also, by the way, from that same town, Dixon, Illinois. And there was some competition for the microphone as they stood at the podium dedicating a new hospital. And it was very hard to displace Luella Parsons, and it was very hard to displace Ronald Reagan, as there were some very beautiful actresses waiting in the wings, waiting their turn. And I think somebody heckled them from the crowd and said, "Get him off the stage, we want to hear Gloria Graham." But he did talk well and obsessively about, and by the way, it was an era of American history and American politics where there was a lot to talk about. Like Germany was taking over. Nations were rising and falling like dominoes. In the post-war years, the threat of communism was on everybody's mind, and Reagan got very involved, read a lot of papers, talked about it all the time, much to the boredom of his more frivolous companions in Hollywood. I mean, his wife at the time, Jane Wyman, said that, like, you wind up Ronald and he never stops talking. She says, I'll be obsessed about I'm supposed to be portraying some, deaf mute or something, and I'm, trying to figure out how to play this and that studio politics, and Ronald is babbling on about politics, and he is driving me crazy. I think there were a couple whose interests diverged early in life, and Ronnie went political, and Jane didn't, and that contributed to the collapse of their marriage. Very sad.
And that's something I want to get back to talk about the book, but I just want everyone to know that our guest, and we're just thrilled to have him, is Danforth Prince, who is a partner in the organization Blood Moon. Is it Blood Moon Productions?
Well, we call it Blood Moon Productions. We're different from a publishing house in that we produce much of what we publish in-house here. I think that is a recognition on my part of the unique experience of Darwin Porter as a person whose fingers were in the pot of the gossip associated with most of the major literary and journalistic and media-related movements since the 1950s. Darwin knew an awful lot of people. He went out a lot. He entertained people. He bought dinners for people who would spill their souls over dessert. Darwin has a photographic memory and would rush back to his lodging and record the details of the dialogues he had with Anita Finley, the feminist poet, for example, that evening, and with Tennessee Williams or Gore Vidal or Carson McCullers or any of the stellar names in his entourage. His archives fill rooms of this building we have here on Staten Island. So we are Blood Moon Productions, with the focus on the word blood moon. There's been a couple lunar eclipses lately. Our name was well chosen.
I want to just mention the name of the book again. It's Love Triangle, Ronald Reagan, Jane Wyman, Nancy Davis, All the Gossip, Unfit. But I thought maybe in the time we have left, I'd like to talk a little bit about the women in Ronald Reagan's life. These are women that most people today, the young people, I don't think they even know them.
Well, I have this vision that one day when Darwin are dead, and when we've seen the great light at the end of the tunnel leading to whatever awaits us at the end of that tunnel, that there will be a marvelous party filled with all the actors, the A-list, the B-list, and the D-list of actors waiting for us with
knives,
all the sybaritic devices that God will allow in his or her kingdom to come. It'll be a great, fabulous, drunken, raucous party of people laughing at the ironies of their lives. What I'm trying to say is all of these petty, brouhaha, romantic, professional, casting couch drama, they're all over Darwin's brilliant book. And all of them common knowledge, breeded around Hollywood, many of them documented by other directors. But they will be waiting for Darwin with a fabulous party and waiting for me, whichever one of us goes first.
I'm sure that's going to happen, and I want to be there.
You'll be there, Anita,
but I want to be there as the impresario, getting the two of you together. But wait, I want to ask a couple of questions. I was curious about this. Was Nancy Davis and Jane Wyman, would they ever sit and talk to each other? I mean, did they hate each other?
No, I don't think I don't know. You might ask that of Darwin, actually. I'm not aware that they were. In fact, they probably had rather enormous embarrassment with one another over. I mean, former spouses and former wives. I'm speaking to an audience with your listeners there in South Florida who are the much married, frequently divorced, many-faceted family audiences in South Florida. I think everyone is very, appreciative of the anguish that goes through in the collapse of one family unit and the rebuilding of another. When Ronald was running for president, it was an embarrassment at the time that he had actually been embarrassed. I don't think that the American public cares about that at all anymore. It seems part of the things that we worry about so much at the time that end up not being important in the long run.
Oh, that's true. I was thinking about some of the things that Darwin has put in his books, and now when you see politics and what's going on, I mean, the Clinton fiasco, the things that are happening now with these senators, one is supposed to be in Appalachia and the trail, and he's really in Venezuela or wherever, Argentina. I mean, this is wild stuff. They're just not known the way the movie stars were known.
I think that the value of the Reagan book involves, yes, there are scandals and there are women and there are A-list actresses all over peppering the landscape of this book. And I think I'll leave you to the gossipy individual details of that to Darwin. I am not the man to tee-hee over the sexual peccadillos of the characters we write about. I am always the one who views it rather with, again, sardonic, detached humor as saying, isn't it different, the beliefs that we were fed or led to believe as in my case, adolescents or when we were all younger about the myth of the Hollywood studio system.
Right.
And I think that our intent with these books is not to cast scurrilous, negative implications on anyone we write about. It's to show the ironies of how different the reality of movie making was from the PR of the studio system that broadcast it to all of us. And in America's case, let's review. America was in the middle of a devastating series of wars. World War II was truly horrible, really the big one. People suffered, millions of people died. 1942 was a very dark year in American history, and my point is that if the American PR machine and if the studio system of Hollywood needed to pump up a little froth and glitter and a few pink clouds as a means of getting American morale through that period, more power to them. We understand, we applaud, we love them for doing it. Years later, under the clear, cold gaze of history and looking back, it is, however, interesting to deconstruct those myths, and no one does it better than Darwin Porter through his titles at Blood Moon Productions, wherein we cast an alternative point of view gathered from eyewitnesses at the time, many of them written, many of them the result of what people said at dinner parties, prevailing wisdom floating through the entertainment community. Is very interesting to look at this revisionistic history 50 years later. It's just a trip. It shouldn't make us feel cheated, but it should make us feel chastened, perhaps, re-examine our own values to see how many of them were formed by all those movie star legends at the time. That's really what I think, that if we're remembered for anything later for what we're doing at Blood Moon, that may be the educational goal or victory that we may have had.
Darwin, that's an excellent point. Very well stated. And, of course, that's the magic of you. I have seen so many of your videos as you go out there to get people to know about the next book and that Darwin and you have put together and are marketing. I'm mesmerized by you. You have, and of course you were down here in South Florida at the World Erotic Art Museum. And by the way, you
that was fun.
But you don't know
Thank
this,
you.
but
That was so much fun. That was
but she just did a wonderful exhibition of Tom of Finland, whom I'm sure you know who that is.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, he's been now being covered in a lot of things, and she did an exhibition with him, which I thought was, of his work, which I thought was...
Naomi Wilzig, whom I adore.
Right.
I think she's fabulous.
She is
a true matriarch, just an absolute goddess. I love Naomi Wilzig at the World Erotic Art Museum on Miami Beach.
Right.
And by the way, one of my former career manifestations was co-author of Frommer's Guide to Finland. And when I was in Helsinki, there I was. I went to the tourist board and I do what I always did. I said, what's new, what's hot in Helsinki? And then, now my story began babbling all these blonde, demure Finns, these socially very rather reticent Finns, and they all began talking about the exhibition of Tom of Finland that they were showing somewhere near the Finnish capital. So, talk about a forbidden art object now being celebrated as part of the national pride of Finland.
They now have a postage stamp. Do you know that? They have a postage stamp of Tom of Finland.
Oh, they do?
Oh, they do.
What a trip. Good for Finland. I love Finland. Great country.
Anyway, getting back to, of course, you and Darwin Porter, I don't know if we have time, but I just wanted to run through some of the titles, and I know you know them by heart.
We have a great backlist.
Go ahead. Just do it, and then maybe we're going to run out of time.
Well, for example, let me see if I can say this safely. We did the definitive gossip guide to Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis.
Productions, but
we're very committed to presenting in indexed form, and this is so grand, so grand, please forgive me, in forms suitable for scholastics at libraries. We do these vast indexes with the hope and with the firm belief that one day our rather raucous, rather irreverent, definitely irreverent books will stand proudly on library shelves alongside their more restrained counterparts.
I'm sure it's going to happen. And be no damn, but before we leave, I just want to say every book is loaded with pictures, loaded. And that's what makes it interesting. Every time you turn the page, there's another great picture that no one has. These are things that Darwin has gotten. I don't know where he's gotten all this stuff. So if you pick up one of the books, in fact, the Jacqueline Kennedy book, Jackie O, was fantastic. Every book is something you will not ever see anywhere else. And I have to tell you, this was a last-minute thing for us to get together, but it was superb, and I can't thank you enough, Dan,
Anita,
for doing
I'm so proud
this.
of you and the outreach you do to South Florida. Your work is so valuable to the senior citizen community. Thank you for how you are and the way you handle it.
Well, it was wonderful talking with you. You have to send me your picture so that I can put you on YouTube with it for this conversation, okay?
I'd like that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My love to both of you. Bye.
Peace and love to all of you. Thank you.